Ladies and gentlemen, look at the standings, look at the scoreboard, look at the trajectory of a season that was supposed to be a revolution, but is currently looking like a slow-motion wreck. The Indiana Fever are standing on a crumbling ledge, and as of this moment, they are staring down into the abyss of a lost season. We were told this was the beginning of a new era. We were told that the arrival of a generational talent would change the gravity of the league. But what we are witnessing right now is not a rise to power. It is a collision between the hype of a superstar and the absolute dysfunction of an organization that seems determined to get in its own way. We need to have a very serious, very uncomfortable conversation about the state of the Indiana Fever. We need to talk about why a team with this much talent is currently sitting in 7th place, watching their playoff hopes evaporate like mist in the morning sun. This isn't just about one bad night in Atlanta. This is about a systemic failure of leadership.
Clark sidestepping three is good, right over Reese.
So she can go for third. A total collapse of defensive identity and a coaching philosophy that feels more interested in individual agendas than in winning basketball games. Let's start with the cold, hard reality of the numbers, because the box score from this game against the Atlanta Dream isn't just a set of statistics, it is a crime scene. The final score was 113-96. Let that sink in. 113 points. That is a franchise
willing to pass.
Clark takes the three on the drive, able to lay it in. Gorgeous take from Caitlin Clark through the
franchise record for the Atlanta Dream. In the entire history of that organization, they have never put up a number that high, and they did it against an Indiana defense that looked less like a professional unit and more like a voluntary layup drill. You cannot win in this league. You cannot win at any level of basketball when you allow an opponent to treat the hoop like an open ocean. The propaganda would have you believe that everything is fine because the offense is clicking. They will point to the field goal percentages and tell you that the Fever shot 49% from the field. They will tell you that on any other night, that would be enough. But that is the ultimate delusion. While Indiana was busy patting themselves on the back.
She's on a first quarter burner. Clark using the screen from Hines Allen. Clark draws two. Finds the cutter. It's Boston center of the lane.
Back for their 49% shooting. They were busy letting Atlanta shoot 50% from the floor. They let the Dream go 13 for 30 from beyond the arc. That's 43% from three-point land. In a league defined by spacing and shot-making, the Fever played perimeter defense as if it were an optional activity. It was a defensive performance so horrendous, so lacking in urgency, that it was genuinely hard to watch. And then we have to talk about the turnovers. 19 times the Indiana Fever simply handed the ball over to the opposition. You could be playing a middle school team, you could be playing a group of amateurs at the local park, and you are not going to win a basketball game when you cough up the rock 19 times. It is a fundamental lack of discipline that starts at the top and trickles down to every single player on the floor. We have to talk about Caitlin Clark because she is the sun around which this entire solar system revolves. Her stat line looks outstanding on paper. 25 points, 11 of 18 from the field.
Tries to whip it back. Cunningham collects, dumps it in. Hines Allen, the flip is good.
3 of 7 from deep. She was efficient. She was aggressive, but even in a game where she is clearly the best player on the court, we see the cracks in the foundation. Look at the splits, because they tell a story of a team that doesn't know how to sustain excellence. In the first quarter, Caitlin Clark was a god. She had 13 points, 0 turnovers, and a +7 rating. She was controlling the tempo, finding her spots, and looked like the superstar we all know she is. But look at what happened the rest of the way. For the remainder of the game, she had 12 points, 7 turnovers, and a staggering -26 rating. The Fever blew an 11-point lead and never looked back as they plummeted toward a double-digit loss. How does that happen? How does a player go from a +7 to a -26 in the same game? It happens because the coaching staff is failing to adjust. It happens because the offense, which should be running entirely through the most gifted playmaker in the country, is being bogged down by isolation plays and broken sets. There is a segment of the coaching world, specifically Stephanie White, who seems convinced that losing the game is a better alternative than letting Caitlin Clark achieve a signature win or a triple-double. It is a level of stubbornness that defies logic. Run the offense through the person who can actually generate high-quality looks. Let her do.
Gray doing a great job fronting Clark. Here's Mitchell. Oh my! You bet!
What she does. But instead, we see a team that looks lost the moment the initial action breaks down. And where was the help? Kelsey Mitchell was trying her absolute hardest. She finished with 16 points and only 1 turnover. She was trying to stabilize the ship all day long, shooting 5 of 13 from the field and 2 of 4 from 3. She gave you effort. She gave you focus. But a two-person show is not a winning formula in a league this deep. Let's talk about the front court, because this is where the incompetence of the front office and the coaching staff becomes impossible to ignore. We told you during the offseason that this team needed a big. We warned you that the lack of interior presence would be the Achilles heel of this roster, and now you see the consequences. Aaliyah Boston, a cornerstone of this franchise, got into foul trouble early. She finished with 13 points on 4 of 10 shooting, but she couldn't stay on the floor long enough to make a real impact. If she hadn't been anchored to the bench by fouls, she likely walks away with a double-double. But if doesn't win games. When Boston goes out, who do you have? Who is going into the paint to scrap for rebounds? The rebounding numbers in this game were a slap in the face to anyone who cares about fundamental basketball. The Fever gave up 35 total rebounds. They only managed 4 offensive rebounds the entire game. 4. You are giving the opponent second and third chances while you are one and done on the other end. Atlanta's bigs were treats like it was a feast. Angel Reese looked like Dennis Rodman out there. She looked like Shaq. She was doing her thing, playing with an intensity that the Fever simply couldn't match. She finished with 18 points, and she wasn't alone. The entire Atlanta starting 5 reached double digits. Naz Hillman had 19. Alicia Gray had 22. Ryan Howard absolutely torched the Fever for 24 points, going 6 of 15 from the field and 4 of 10 from 3. When you let an entire starting lineup find their rhythm, you aren't just losing a game, you are being dismantled. And while Atlanta was firing on all cylinders, the Fever were getting nothing from key pieces of their rotation. Let's talk about Lexi Hull. 16 minutes of action, 0 points. Not a single basket, not a single free throw. She finished the game with a -11 rating. When you are a rotational player in this league, you cannot afford to go out there and put up a donut hole. You have to provide something, energy, defense, spacing, but the offensive output was non-existent. Then you have to ask why Dantas is even in the game. What is the plan there? Where is Temi Fagbenle? Why is she even on the roster if she isn't going to be utilized to solve these glaring issues in the paint? Misha Hines-Allen played 17 minutes and gave you 9 points on 3 of 5 shooting, but we need more than 3 rebounds from her. We need a physical presence that isn't afraid to get dirty, but instead we see a team that looks like it would rather be anywhere else than in a dogfight for a playoff spot. There is an energy around this Fever roster right now that is frankly bizarre. It's an energy that doesn't scream championship grit. It screams suburban surveillance. They look like the type of people who would snitch on you for taking an extra cookie at a PTA meeting. They look like the neighbors who wait for you to step 1 inch onto their lawn so they can call the authorities. There is a lack of toughness, a lack of that dog mentality that is required to survive the WNBA season. This brings us back to Stephanie White. The calls for her to be fired are not just coming from a place of frustration, they are coming from a place of observation. The way these games are being lost, the lack of defensive adjustments, the questionable rotations, the failure to protect leads, it all falls on the shoulders of the head coach. You lose by nearly 20 points to a team you are supposed to be competing with for postseason relevance. That is an indictment of the entire coaching staff. Something stood out in this game that we cannot ignore. Dawn Staley was in attendance, and for whatever reason, Stephanie White made it her business to give Raven Johnson a massive increase in minutes. Johnson played 21 minutes and scored 9 points. She didn't even see the floor in the previous game. Why the sudden shift? Why now? It feels like the rotations are being handled based on who is watching in the stands rather than what is happening on the hardwood. Meanwhile, players who could actually help stem the tide are left wondering why their numbers aren't being called. It is a level of mismanagement that is insulting to the fans who are selling out these arenas. We have to look at the perspective of people like Coach Anderson, who has been sounding the alarm on this team for a long time. He said the defense is more than just bad, it's a layup drill. He's right. He said the rebounding is atrocious. He's right. But the most biting comment he made was about the fluke of last year. He suggested that the front office was suckered into believing they had a real championship-caliber team because of a few isolation plays and a broken playoff run. He's calling it isolation basketball mixed with a few zoom actions that people mistook for a real system. Even the game winners from the past were often broken plays that just happened to go in. This front office thought they were one piece away, but the reality is that they are miles away from being a serious contender. They are leaning on the individual brilliance of a rookie to mask the fact that the roster construction is fundamentally flawed and the coaching is antiquated. The Indiana Fever are currently sitting in 7th place. Losing this game, losing the momentum they had earlier in the season, it's going to move them down. And if they keep playing with this level of defensive apathy, they aren't just going to move down the standings, they are going to move right out of the playoff picture entirely. Do you realize how devastating that would be? To have the most hyped rookie in the history of the sport, to have the eyes of the world on your franchise, and to miss the postseason because you couldn't figure out how to rebound or stop a simple pick and roll? This game was an eye-opener. It was a cold shower for anyone who thought the Fever had turned a corner. You cannot allow 113 points. You cannot give up 35 rebounds while only grabbing 4 on the offensive end. You cannot have 19 turnovers and expect to be taken seriously. Stephanie White needs to be held accountable. The front office needs to be held accountable. You cannot waste a season of Caitlin Clark's career because you're too stubborn to run a modern offense or too cheap to bring in the interior help this team so clearly needs. The clock is ticking. The season is sliding away. And right now, the Indiana Fever look like a team that is more interested in making excuses than making plays. They look like a team that has bought into its own hype without doing the work to sustain it. If changes aren't made, and I mean immediate, drastic changes to the way this team is coached and the way the rotation is handled, then the 7th spot is just a temporary stop on the way to the bottom. I don't want to hear about growing pains. I don't want to hear about chemistry. I want to see a coach who understands how to use the weapons she has. I want to see a defense that actually contests a shot. I want to see a team that doesn't look like a PTA meeting gone wrong. Look at the stats again. Look at the 113 points. Look at the franchise record you allowed your opponent to set on your watch. That should be a point of national embarrassment for this organization. It should be the catalyst for a total overhaul. But instead, we'll probably hear more of the same. We'll hear about how the offense is fine and how the shots just didn't fall. But the fans know, the people watching these games know, we see the turnovers, we see the lack of effort on the glass, we see the coaching decisions that leave us scratching our heads. The Indiana Fever are at a crossroads. They can either wake up and realize that they are being outworked and outcoached every single night, or they can continue to ride this wave of delusion all the way to the lottery. Caitlin Clark is doing her part. Kelsey Mitchell is doing her part. But a house divided against itself cannot stand. And right now, the coaching staff is handing out the hammers to break the foundation. It is bad. It is very, very bad. And it doesn't get much worse than letting a team make history on you like that. Until this organization decides to prioritize winning over agendas, until they decide to play defense like their jobs depend on it, because they should, this is the result you're going to get. The deadline for excuses has passed. The time for accountability is here. Check the standings, check the box score, and tell me I'm wrong. The Fever are in trouble, and the call is coming from inside the house. I'm telling you, this was a horrendous game to watch. It was an indictment of everything that is currently wrong with the Indiana Fever. If you're a fan, you should be demanding better. If you're a player, you should be embarrassed. And if you're the coach, you should be looking for the exit. Because at the end of the day, 113 points tells you everything you need to know. The defense is a ghost. The rebounding is a myth. And the playoff hopes are a dream that is quickly turning into a nightmare. Stop the nonsense. Fix the rotations. Play some damn defense. And for the love of the game, let Caitlin Clark be the superstar she was brought here to be. Anything less is a betrayal of the talent on this roster and the fans who are paying to see it. The game is over, the stats are in, and the verdict is clear. This is not a championship culture. This is an organization in crisis, and the clock is at midnight. Check the haters off. I'm out of here. Peace.